Hello everyone. Today we will develop a simple streamlit web application. We will be using Google's generative AI to build a very basic introductory generative AI model in which you will be putting up a question and with the help of Google's generative AI, we will be answering those questions. We'll also build a UI interface which we can leverage to ask those questions. I'll be using Visual Studio Code Editor for this session, and we'll be using Python as the language. Now we open the Visual Studio Code. I've created a folder called Gemini and open that folder here. How you can do it is go to File and click on Open Folder. In that open folder, you'll select your folder location and you click on select folder. Since I've already done that, I'll click on cancel. So Gemini this folder does not have any files yet. I'll start by creating a .env file. A .env file is to create the environment variables in which we will be storing our API keys. Now API keys, I'll show you how to generate it. API keys are sensitive information which you should not be sharing with everyone. Let me name my environment file as popoy.env. Okay. So what we'll be doing in this, or what we'll be placing in this file, is Google underscore API underscore key is equal to, and I'll paste my API key in this space. So your API key will come here, right? Let's head over to Google and generate the API key. Generate API key for Gemini. Let's click on the first link, get API key. Let me sign in. So after signing in, I arrive at this page, aistudio.google.com. I'll click on get API key. I consent to Google's terms and services. I don't want any email notifications. I click on continue. As soon as I click on continue, I click on get API key, and the API key is now generated. I shall copy this API key. I'll head back to the env file, and this is where I'll paste your API key here, right? These are the instructions for you. I'll paste it here and then we'll create the next file. Next up we have our file, let's call it app or my app.py. This is the Python file that we'll be building our web application in. Have my app.py. Let's start by importing libraries from .env. So before that, you can also go to or create a new terminal. Let me save this file. You can create a new terminal and see the Python in the terminal. You can go to python underscore version, dash hyphen version, and from .env import load underscore .env. So we're getting an underline here, so probably the library isn't installed. So pip install .env. I'll push this command into the terminal. You need at least Python 3.8 to use the Google's generative AI model. So while this is loading and installing, let me move on to other lines of code. So we have our popoy.env file. Let's load that environment file, and I'll call it here popoy.env. Now, okay, our .env library has been installed. So the reason I chose a different name, so the other way you could have done it is that you simply remove or you simply create a .env file instead of a popoy.env, and in that case you will not need to pass the name of the file. So had you created a .env file only, then this would have been your command, right? So but right now we've created a popoy.env, so we'll keep it as this. Let me save it. I have saved the file, and let me try to run it. Let's see what happens when we run the file. No module name .env. Okay, let's check this error. So let's create the virtual environment first. Let me type python -m virtualenv venv, and let's call our environment virt environment. Click enter. We notice new environment has been created. Yes, we want it here. So you'll see that the folder has been created and the code is still running. It has created all these subfolders inside of it. Now that we've created the virtual environment, we'll also have to activate it. To activate it, you can use the script dots and scripts activate. Okay, so to check that error, I went on to ChatGPT and told it that I'm facing this error, and this is the resolution that it has provided me. I'll head over and use this. So it says that this error occurs because PowerShell's execution is set to restrict, etc. To remedy it, just right click on start menu, open Windows PowerShell. So I have opened that and do this. If you see restricted or remote signed in, you will need to change it. Okay, so let's change it. How do I change it? We'll use this particular code. Okay, set execution policy. We've executed this and confirm the change by yes. Activate the virtual environment. So let's go back to Visual Studio and type the same code. Now we are again seeing the same error, and when I do get execution policy, it still shows me restricted. So let me update a different code wherein I think, yeah, alternatively to change it globally, you can run this. So let's try running this piece of code, and let's see our execution policy. It shows remote signed. Would activate. Okay, so now we've activated it. So this is an error I'm encountering for the first time, but good that we learned another thing out here. I'll recapitulate what we just did. So we started by checking if we have Python installed. We did that by using Python -- version. We got to know that we are in Python 3.11, so we have Python. Then we created a virtual environment using Python -m venv virt environment. That's the name of my virtual environment. Then having created this virtual environment, we went ahead and activated it using the last line of code, and we faced an error in between as well, and thankfully we've resolved it. So we are inside our virtual environment, as you can see. we have our code written here. After activating the virtual environment, let's install the library that will help us run the .env. So pip install python -env. Let's click enter and let it install. Okay, so it's a successful installation, and we see that the error has also gone away. Right, so let's move on to the next step. In the next step, let's head over to building the application, the basic application that we were talking about. um, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be using streamlit for this application. Another point, while you're using Visual Studio Code, you notice this dot comes up whenever the file is not saved. So as soon as I click Control S, the dot goes away. So keep that in mind. Let's start with import streamlit as st. So I think it doesn't recognize streamlit, but we'll install that as well. And then also let's import google dot generative AI as GenAI. We notice that both of these are not recognized, so let's have these installed as well. Go over to your terminal and type pip install streamlit. Let it run, and I'll also type my next command to install google.generative AI. After it downloads, you'll not see the underline that's here, so let it download. So Streamlit is just for the UI, and the beauty of Streamlit is that we can customize it, we can add a lot of features, headers, the web page icon, hyperlinks to the pre-built website. We will build all of that as we move along. Right now our focus is to just have the basic bone structure of this entire application. There are multiple functions which Streamlit offers, and the beauty of Streamlit and Chainlit. So Chainlit is another such software, another such library. So you can use Chainlit and Streamlit. These are pre-built UI web applications. There is an entire documentation of Streamlit for further customization, and there you can further customize your web application. We will use Google's generative AI. As I told earlier, we'll be using Google's generative AI as the model, as the base model on which our application will run. Okay, so we've installed Streamlit. Let's also install pip, not here, over in your command prompt, right? Pip install Google generative AI and click on enter. So while it installs, let me head back. So let's start so we've imported, and after this load we'll be importing Google generative AI as GenAI. Let's load or configure our model. So you remember we have our API key, our Google's API key in the .env file. We'll have to configure it. So we have to let our model know that, hey, your API key is present in the env file. So I'll do API key. Configure takes this API key as an argument, and where is my API key? It's in the get underscore. We'll use the os.getEnv, and if you remember, we saved the API key under the name Google underscore API underscore key. So this configures your API key. Now your model knows that the particular API key has to be used to run run the model, right? As I said, it's a very basic tutorial. In this, we'll be using a very basic model. So we have Gemini Pro and Gemini Pro Vision. Vision is for text and images. Gemini Pro is just for text, so we'll be using text. In fact, Google has discontinued Google Pro Vision. It has started using a different model. We'll use that, of course. For now, we'll use GenAI dot generative model. You see it is an autofill it here. So how I did it was I'll redo it. So let's say you see that the VSC Visual Studio is already suggesting generative model. So you just click on tab and it will autocomplete. And what's a generative model? It's Gemini hyphen Pro, right? You notice we haven't saved our file yet, so I'll also keep saving it. It's a good practice to keep saving it. It can crash anytime, right? So let's define our first function. Let's say get Gemini response. In this response, we'll input a question, this function. So def is where you start a function. Keyword to start a function. This is the function name. Then in the brackets, we'll give the arguments that go inside this function. So we'll be giving one argument. This will be the particular question which the user will ask in our chatbot, and use the colon key to start the function. Get inside, and let's say that hey, the answer to this question, let's store it in the variable answer. The answer is simply model. Model is the one that we defined above. Model dot generate underscore content. That's the command, and the command is generate content based on the question. That's it. And you do return answer as a text. That's it. Saving this file. This is your entire model. Yeah, that's it. That's your entire model. We'll head out, and now we'll build the UI on Streamlit. Our Streamlit application that will function as the UI will look as follows. So we've already imported Streamlit as st. So all our commands would go like st. So let's say we add a header. Okay, we'll call that my first application. Then let's get the user's input. So the way I'm imagining it is that you first see a header, then you see an input box, then you click on submit, and then you see the response. So if I show it to you, the way I am thinking about it is, here is the header, right? Then you have an input box, then you have a submit button, and oops, that's a very long submit button, and here you'll see the response. So 4 components. Let's build these 4 components. So we already have the header, right? We'll build the other components. We have to accept the user's input. Let's call it input 1 for now, because I'll build on this later. So let's say that's input 1. For st or Streamlit to have or accept an input, I'll use st.text input, and what text do you want the user to see, right? So I'll say ask your question here. Okay, That's this, and this is not compulsory, but there's a key argument as well in the st.input function. Now I couldn't fully understand what it is, but it just says that it's good to have a key in every st.text input function that you use. So let's say if we had another input to st.text input, ask your second question here, your key would have been input 2. So it's a good practice to keep these keys, firstly define these keys and then keep them separate. Although I couldn't understand anything else anything more than from the documentation than this. Let's have a submit button, wherein submit would be a st dot submit or st dot submit, and we'll let's call this button submit your question, or let's call it click to submit your question. Okay. Now what we've done is we've built the header, we've asked for the user's input, we've this is the place where the user will give it an input. This streamlit will help us or provide us with this box, and then they have the submit button, and then you'll see the response in the below section. So when I click on submit, only then the response should come out, right? So that is the condition that we'll be putting in next, that if we click submit, then what happens is for input 1, I'll generate answer underscore 1, which will simply be, remember we defined this function. So, and the output of this function is, what this function returns is answer.text. So I'll store this answer.text in this variable called answer1. So I'll define answer1 is equal to, it's simply the function get Gemini response. And what do you want a response to? We want a response to input 1, because this variable stores whatever question the user has asked, input underscore 1. You remember get Gemini response takes an argument, question, this, so don't get confused, but this can be any random word, right? So takes an input X, and basis that input X, call it your question, call it input, call it context, call it anything. Basis this input X, it generates an answer. This answer is returned in the form of text, and we are storing this answer.text in this variable answer underscore 1. That's it. And so this is the first thing that happens when we click on submit. So not only do we want to want the model to generate a response, but we also want to see that response. So this line would generate a response, spelling mistake, generate a response, but we also want to show that response. So to see that response, st or streamlit has a command called st.write, and in which we'll simply pass answer underscore 1. Or let's say if you want it to be clearer, I'll copy the same thing and write the answer to your question is this. So anything that goes inside st.write will be printed on the Streamlit application. So let me save this file, let me save my app.py, and my friends, in just 24 lines, you have built your own model, own generative model, and there are this is a blank line, this is a blank line, so not even 24 lines. In just 20 lines, you have your own generative AI model. I'm excited to see how it looks. I'll click on terminal. I'll get a new terminal and say streamlit run my app .py for me. Okay. And Streamlit will open this beautiful UI. Oh, and we encounter our first error. It says OS has no much attribute get underscore env. Okay, I think it's get env. And we see the same error on our terminal as well. I have taken away the underscore. Let's click on new terminal again and ask Streamlit run my app.py, hopefully without any errors this time. It's running and Streamlit has no attribute submit. Okay, Streamlit has no attribute submit. So it's not actually submit, it is streamlit.button, st.button. That's the attribute. So I'll click on save again. That's the beauty of coding together. You see all the errors and resolve them simultaneously. The Streamlit run my app.py. Okay, I think third time's the charm. Running. Oh, okay. So you see this is your header, my first application. You ask your question here. This is the where you click and ask your question and click to submit you question. Okay, let's change this as well. Click to submit your question and click on save. Go back and you see that this is still the same, but on the right top you see here your source file has changed. Do you want to rerun? Yes, I want to rerun. And when I rerun, you see you has changed to your. So let's ask your question. Hi, how are you today? Submit. It is running and let's see what response it gives us. Wow. So our first response, as an AI, I do not have personal feelings or experiences. Da, 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 da. So friends, you've developed your congratulations on building your first generative AI application that can answer almost every question that's since it is built on Google's Gemini Pro. And all now everything up next that's coming now is optional, so you can change your header. You can write my first gen AI application, click on save, click submit to answer your question, go back, let's see, oh, go back, yeah, it says let's ask me to rerun. So my first generative AI application, click to submit, answer your question. So now you'll recognize that firstly the answer has changed. So that's expected because every time it generates a fresh response on its own. And secondly, unlike ChatGPT, Bard or Gemini, we do not have a chat history here. So the history, it's just, it has no memory. The model has no memory. It doesn't know what you asked earlier. So if I ask it, what did I ask you previously? It will probably not, or it will not say, hi, how are you? It will say something else. You asked me previously to translate the following text from English to German, so it's a random response. Okay, so that's how this is without history. That's why I called it a very, very basic model. Later on, we'll build on superior models. Benefits of Gen AI. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. You've learned how to build a basic generative AI model. do check out the Streamlit documentation, in which you'll find more things to beautify this application. You can have icons here, emojis here, a different web icon here instead of the default, and generate responses. I'll see you in the next video.